if it goes. And we are live. This is Crash Canon. I'm Chris, and I have a guest today. Who are you?
My name is Angela Erickson, and I have a podcast that I very infrequently post on.
Well, you just had one today. That was kind of good timing, huh?
Yes, it's been something that I recorded it probably a month ago, maybe longer. That's how slow I am in getting things out right now. So I was like, I just need to do it because I have another interview that I also need to get put out with Nancy Charles. So
Okay.
so that I need to get started on. But I was like, gosh, I got to get this other one out first because I recorded it first. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of sitting on a couple interviews as well right now that I'm like, I've done it. So I've got an in-home like makeshift studio where I've had like local pseudo celebrities and friends on my podcast. And I'm just like, editing is so painful.
That's the worst part. Honestly, I hate it so much, like so much. I've done a lot of live shows and whatnot, but like also recording times. Sometimes I think it's better to pre-record and then you can. But the back end stuff is what I don't like. Even though it's good and post production it can be great. Sometimes it's better. You can take out all the ums and pauses, all of that stuff. But I also really hate doing that, and I hate listening to my voice in the post-production. So the live stream is my preference. So I totally get why you do that.
And people are way more forgiving if your live stream has problems than if your
That's true.
pre-recorded uploaded video has problems.
Yes, yeah, it's so funny that you say that. I was just listening to, every once in a while I listen to what is their podcast called? The Devil in the Details. It's Jordan and Dan Burke's podcast. They talk a lot about spiritual warfare, but they've been doing a series on the Ignatian spiritual exercises. And there was one, please, Jordan, don't hate me, but there was one where they were like, picked up a phone call in the middle of it and they took a break. You got all these long pauses. And I texted Jordan. I was like, really? You left the phone call in there, huh? And he goes, oh no. I thought we got that out of all of the platforms. We must have missed Apple Podcasts. But yeah.
That's funny.
So it's a real thing.
Oh yeah. And the worst thing that I've found with a pre-record, and this has happened to me more than once, but thankfully I've always been able to recover it, is audio issues.
Yeah, sometimes those can be brutal. Yeah.
Way worse when you're doing a podcast to have audio issues than any visual glitches at all.
Well, sometimes you can't even tell that you're having audio issues while you're recording, and that's the part that stinks. So unless you really do go back and you like listen to everything, you have no idea. Like I've had people say like that my mic was hot, and I can't really tell that if my mic is hot unless somebody tells me. Like I think I was even doing a live stream and I was like, sorry guys, like if you don't tell me that my mic is hot, I don't know. So that can always be helpful if you guys listeling let us know when we're having issues, because otherwise we may not be able to pick it up on our end.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I have discovered, and I didn't know why, every guide said like don't use 2 USB mics for a local podcast, and I was like, I can figure this out. So I hooked up 2 USB mics for both of the first 2 podcasts, and the second one I'm still editing, and it's my fault because I did what it said not to do. 2 USB mics can get out of sync on the system level.
I could see that. I really could, especially all that digitizing can be a heavy load on whatever you're working on. Yeah, that's tough. When I first got started podcasting, I didn't realize that I needed a new router and modem. Mine was like ancient. And so I couldn't figure out why my internet connection was always terrible. And I would get a lot of stuff out of sync or very pixelated, or my streams would just drop. And I remember when I finally figured it out, I felt like such an idiot, a complete idiot. But we finally figured it out. And that was like one of those things totally when you get started in this field. And I'm like kind of a Luddite a little bit. So that just did not do me any favors. So
I feel like we've got to be in a similar age range though, because like,
I'm sure.
we can't be like that far out of tune here. So you and I are probably both like in that range where the Gen Z knows way more about computers than we do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I'm like a younger millennial or whatever. Like I turn 33 next month or something.
Oh, we're pretty much the exact same age. Then.
Okay, and you have a lot of kids too. I mean,
Yeah.
a good handful. So did you get married young too? And to see this is what
23.
okay. So this is what I do on podcasts. I ask if I'll be interviewed, and then I tend to interview the interviewer. So I apologize for that. But so you got married at 23. I was 21 when we got married.
My
So
wife she was 23 as well. We had just finished college when we got married. That was pretty much it.
yep, yeah, I was finishing my last year, and yep, sounds about right. My husband, he went to trade school, so and he's a few years older. So we didn't have both of us getting out of college at the same time. Gosh, that must have been tough. Like,
Yeah, it was.
yeah, that's brutal. So
I
over the first
I finished
years,
6 months before my wife did.
did you?
Just for the record. So
Did
no,
you? That's
she had
still a lot.
she had a teaching degree, so like she had to do the student teaching thing, and so that added a little time. It added about 1 semester to her time.
Okay, is she teaching now, or like do you guys homeschool or anything?
She did about 2.5, almost I think 3.5 years of teaching.
Okay.
Child number 2 ended that pretty much because
I understand. Yeah.
It was like we're paying more than her salary to put kids in daycare. So like, why would we do that?
Yep. Yeah. It took us until kid number 3 to get there. I actually kind of felt that way before. I worked for Students for Life of America coming out of college, and then I left that position when I had my firstborn because I knew I wasn't going to be willing to travel constantly for my job anymore with a baby. And then I ran a pregnancy center for a couple of years, and then after that, I ended up working for LifeSite News doing like fundraising development with their major donors.
Right.
And by the time a year of that had passed, and I was still doing a lot of traveling and stuff, I just was like, I can't justify it. And at that time, I was sort of coming into this place where I was like really becoming disillusioned with the feminism that really has crept into the church. And I think I had imbibed a lot of that, especially when I worked at Students for Life. That is a part of their ethos, is like pro-life feminism is cool. And I really believed that for quite a while. And then when I did start to stay home, there was kind of a deconstruction that happened. But LifeSite was a great organization to work for. I know people like either really love or hate them, but
I usually like them for the most part, to be honest with you.
Hands down the best organization I've ever worked for, like in terms of the way that they treat their employees at that time. Obviously it's been a while, so no idea what it's like now, but it was a great organization to work for when I was there. So that was like during the McCarrick scandal. It was just sheer chaos.
Oh, that was when you were working for LifeSite?
Yeah.
That'd be a wild era to be working for LifeSite.
Yeah, it was something else, I'll tell you that. But anyway,
I do remember I recently went to my wife and I and our whole family, we usually try to find a March for Life to do every year, or something adjacent to it, but we had to leave because the speech it felt very feminist to me, and I was like, I'm not sticking around for this.
Yeah, so there's so much of that nonsense right now. It's bad. It
was like the whole, we're women and we can do it all and we should have a job and sit, and the kids. And I'm like, okay, first off, there's a lot of problems with the idea of like doing it all. Like, I think I can do it all. I'm like, no, I can't. I cannot do it all. Neither can my wife. Nobody can do it all. If you could, you'd be like some kind of a miracle worker.
Well, I actually think we do a huge disservice in the pro-life movement not being honest about it. Because that's actually one of the things that people who are pro-choice or pro-abortion intuit correctly, is that it's difficult to raise children. That doesn't mean it's wrong or it's bad or it's not something to strive for. It's hard. And I think when we pretend like it's not, we're not doing anybody any favors. And like it is dishonest. And I think selling this lie also gives people the idea of like, well, everybody said it was that I would be able to do it all. Why don't I feel like I can do it all? That's one of the many issues I take with.
I mean, if you're trying to convince a feminist to have a baby because they can do it all, then they're going to realize they've been lied to at some point.
Well,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like they're gonna need help. They're gonna need like
we all need it. I mean, even those,
grandparents or somebody
yes,
to help with the children. And so like I don't think it's really doing anybody a positive service to tell them they can do it all. You should really just tell them what it's gonna be like.
right. No, I totally agree. And that is one of the biggest frustrations I have within the pro-life movement right now. I know Carrie Gress is writing a book about how feminism has um, made its way into Catholicism, and she's writing a whole book on how you can't be a Catholic feminist. So I'm like
Yeah.
excited to see what she writes about that, because I was always kind of not sure. I'm sure she gets accused of being a feminist because she has a job um
You
and
clearly
like,
didn't see my comment in your premiere earlier where I said Carrie Gress exists in the space that you're saying it's hard to exist in. I'm like, no, she literally exists in that
she does.
space
She
and she does a
does.
good job with it.
I think part of it is that people think women doing anything at all outside of homemaking is feminism, and that's not feminism.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of women who run Etsy stores and like they have job like these different things where they can make money, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I mean, Tim Flanders made a really great video. Alice. He made a great video a couple of years ago, probably because I was at that time a fairly frequent contributor on the Meaning of Catholic. And one of the biggest quote unquote criticisms that I get whenever I'm on like Nick Cavasso's channel or on Meaning of Catholic is that that I'm a woman. So I just shouldn't be talking, basically.
That's like the worst like criticism you could, like, you're just a woman, so just get off here, like that's the worst thing. Like
Oh, I hear it a lot. I
I
hear it a
think
lot.
I
It's
think
so
there
funny.
are arguments for specific not attitudes, actions. There's specific actions that people shouldn't take in general in public, and I think they apply to most people evenly. Like when a guy poses shirtless on a Twitter post for a selfie, it's like,
Yes.
okay, thanks, didn't need to see that.
Right.
Or like if a woman is wearing lingerie on Twitter, I'm like, nope, didn't need to see that.
Or for her
But
wedding gown. What is going on, you guys? Why are wedding dresses practically lingerie these
oh,
days?
that's what you were
Get a
talking about. Okay, yeah.
grip. Yes, no, it's horrible. It's like it
So
makes me
I
so
guess what I'm trying to
angry.
say is like I don't think there's a reason why you can't have people, like just people in general, existing in these spaces regardless of where they're coming from or their background. But at the same time, there are arguments to be made where if somebody is doing a job that doesn't fit their vocation, which I don't think podcasting from your house while taking care of a baby says, hey, you're not doing the mom thing. Like that's kind of a silly
I'm
argument to
neglecting
make.
my children. But I
Yeah.
have been accused of that, like explicitly that I've been told I'm a bad mom because I have a podcast, or because once I had an article published in Crisis magazine. So I must be a feminist because I wrote an article while my children were sleeping once, and Eric Sammons thought it was decent enough to publish. Um,
That like I said, I think you could make the argument for specific activities being
well,
against people's vocations, but I
what it
don't think what you're doing would count as
no.
one of those things.
Well, really, what it comes down to is that I think people have this idea that women speaking in public is like challenging the authority of men. It really is a fundamental misunderstanding of what authority is,
Mm-hmm.
and like this question of whether or not women should be teaching. And of course, sacred scripture says women should not be teaching in a liturgical setting, which I completely agree with. But
Especially the women in that era, in that context, in that location,
yeah,
because they were like straight up pagan priestesses. So it's like, like
yes.
they were the worst of the worst.
Yes, but the Catholic Church has always been Christianity has always been a safe haven for women, and it's always
Mhm.
elevated women. That's what makes it distinctive, actually, is there's never been any other religion, except maybe save for a couple of pagan religions, that elevated women and treated them as goddesses. But generally speaking, um, especially in the ancient world, they were very violent towards women in particular and treated them as
Yeah.
property. That was very, actually, even Aristotle, Aristotle basically believed women were like defective men, You know, is like
Yeah,
there's
him.
this sort of
There was a couple other philosophers that said very
yeah.
similar things. Yeah,
Yes. You know, so that's like one of the reasons that women flocked to Christianity right from the beginning is because it was the first time women were treated with dignity, and it really modeling the honor and reverence we show to Our Lady. So I always wonder, like, would these men say the same thing if Our Lady was correcting them on something? Or they'd be like, Mary, you can't say that. You're a
no.
woman.
There,
Like,
there's no. I was thinking about that exact thing earlier, but it was related to Protestants. I was like, can you imagine Mary walking up to these Protestants? Would they really say the things they're saying on Twitter? Like, I doubt it. I
horrible.
really doubt it. Especially like, imagine Mary and Jesus walking together towards a group of Protestants. You know, if they could transport back in time and be there. But it's like, there's no way they would say the things they're saying.
Well, what like I mean, it's almost frightening to consider like how the look he would give someone for talking so disparagingly about his own mother. Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I would be afraid, and you should be afraid. You want to
Yeah.
talk about Our Lady as being basically nothing but a vessel. Yeah,
I think
we've got a
most
problem.
people, even if they don't even get along with their mom, would still want to smack somebody who talked bad about their mom.
Yeah, but I think Protestantism is a lot of the reason we have so many issues understanding the role of women in the church today. Like because they ushered in a lot of feminism and disregarded the role of Our Lady. Like they are the ones who decided that she was no longer important. And so it fed into this narrative. It's like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, oh, Our Lady's not important anymore. So we're going to act like then that means that like women's role in society is not important anymore. So we need to make it important again. And so you have like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy going on, and it's all prideful. Like it's all
Mhm.
this like navel gazing that's going on. And I do blame largely Protestantism's rejection of Our Lady for the current state of sex relations between men and women in the world, especially the Western world. Like I think that the rejection of Our Lady is why we are where we are today. That's probably a little bit of a bold claim, but I think that's the root of it.
Well, it's a big part of it for sure because I don't think Protestantism even views the relationship between man and woman in the same way that Catholicism does at all.
No, it's reductionist. Like it is, and that's the core. The problem of everything is very reduced to like this utilitarianism, and you see that in the way that they talk about Our Lady. They treat her in a utilitarian way, and then they project that back onto themselves, basically. Like, and that's why this is all so messed up. And I do see elements of that have sort of seeped in. That fundamentalism has seeped into the church, and it's become an overcorrection now of feminism, and we're seeing people embrace the same weird ideas that we have rejected as a church for a really long time.
Between
It's
that and the
really
red pill,
bizarre.
right?
Well, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
It's very this chauvinistic mentality. It's like, yeah, feminism is horrible, but we don't need to overcorrect, you guys. Come on.
This was actually a discussion I had with Bug Hall almost to a T. It was like the red pill is not the answer, just like communism is not the answer to poverty. You know, just
Yeah.
because people have problems doesn't mean you let Satan take over. You know,
Well,
you
it
don't
happens
need
with a
to.
lot of stuff, and it happens like on the other end of things too. Like, I was looking at a magazine that typically, when they first started, was like a pretty decent conservative magazine, and now it's just a rag, and it's like it's just the same vain garbage that you would get from like a lefty magazine, but it has like a Christian conservative veneer. It's very disturbing. I'm like, you are the sheep in wolf's clothing now. And you're like, I don't even think they realize it because they're boss babes and they're models.
Well, boss babes on either side of the aisle are not exactly a good thing.
No.
No.
Oh my gosh. No. No.
Just like I don't really care for like what is it the like that guy who went on the whatever podcast and like tried making this claim that men should have multiple concubines or whatever. That was ridiculous too. It's like you're not a better man for having multiple women. That is just flat out wrong.
It's really interesting because there is a big shift going on, right? And I think a lot of it is because monogamy seems unattainable for a lot of people. And I think men are feeling very rejected, and like that's a whole nother thing. I'm sure you've listened to Nicholas Cavazos talk about that. I've talked about that with him on my own channel. Like, dating is a nightmare right now for Gen Z. And then you have, on the flip side of that, you have this slightly older demographic of men going their own way. Are you familiar with that movement? Yeah.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Yeah. No, I remember that being a thing.
Yes. And so it's really interesting because it's all an overcorrection to feminism, but a lot of it is exacerbated by the internet. I call, like, social media is really kind of anti-social media because it makes people more antisocial.
Yeah.
And because it's really easy to, like, treat people like complete garbage when you don't actually have to physically interact with them, right? Like, when we can create these beautiful echo chambers where we're never offended, or if we are, we can gang pile up on the same thing with, like, all of our buddies. And so it's, like, really easy to live in this self-created safe space where we don't really have to suffer the consequences of speaking poorly to people and, like, treating them as subhuman. And so I think the men who go their own way movement, I think they sort of live in an echo chamber where they get these ideas and everyone's like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. And then the same thing kind of with these young men who are trying to date. Nicholas's episode talking about why everyone needs to get rid of dating apps was amazing, because he talks so much about the commodification of human beings, especially in dating. But that's really, again, it's that utilitarianism that is just so steeped into our society right now. It's very fascinating. And that really is feminism and utilitarianism. They all kind of dovetail together.
I have a friend who's actually working on creating a Catholic specific dating app that tries to fine tune to Catholic ideas.
Does it?
Yes.
That's like a legit one?
Yeah, like a legit one. Not like the you're kind of Catholic, so join whatever Catholic dating app. No, it's meant to be like, let's filter out by liturgy you like. Let's filter, like, those kinds of things, you know. It gets down to the details. So, like, while I don't think apps are the best way to meet people, for the record, my wife and I did not meet on an app, which is actually getting unique these days.
That's crazy.
I've known my wife since we met when we were like 8 or 9 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Obviously, that's not
where the story. That's so sweet. Tell me how you guys met. Tell me all the things.
We were on a, like, recreational swim team together in like our early year. Actually, there's a lot of connections, but like our moms graduated high school together, all those kinds of things. So it's like,
that's really sweet.
A heck of a lot of connections. But we reconnected in our early 20s because we worked at the same place briefly in like a co-op type of thing. So I'm in engineering. So, like, the idea of somebody has a teaching degree doing a co-op at the same place I was, kind of weird, but that's how it happened.
Okay.
And so we reconnected in our 20s, and eventually both of us were single, and that was pretty much the end of that, because
you weren't single for long, because you got married at 23, so
yeah. Well, the second I knew she was single, I knew I had to date her. So of course I ran the opposite direction, because I was like, I'm not ready to get married. And then
you knew right away it was going to go in that direction.
I did, yeah.
That's
I knew immediately. In fact, I told her that the day we started dating. I said, I'm afraid to date you because we will get married. That's what I told her. And she still agreed to date me. So there was that. And then
she was okay with it.
Yeah. 5 months later, had an engagement ring, asked her to marry me. And then we finished college, and then we got married.
Wow. That's a great story.
That's the short version. That's the very short version. There's a whole lot that goes on between those things, but
that's funny. Yeah. I met my husband when I was 17, and he must have been 21 then. But I graduated with one of his sisters, and then another sister of his. She and I dated two brothers throughout pretty much all of high school. And so, like, I knew him and I knew his family. I didn't know him. He was out working on the road. He's a lineman. At the time, he was doing construction in North Dakota. And so, like, I didn't know who he was until my friend's graduation party. That was the first time I met him. And then, yeah, like, pretty much never stopped talking after that. So yeah. But I knew early on, like, I had a God moment. I still remember it was like I don't know how to describe it. It just sounds so weird, but it was like being electrocuted, which is funny because he works with electricity. But I still remember we were going to the science museum in St. Paul. I love the science museum, but we're on a like an interchange or an exit, and as we were turning, I just, like, it felt like being electrocuted, and this thought came into me, and it was like, you're going to marry this man. And I remember being like, whoa, because it was definitely not from me at all. And yeah, it was right. That was like 6 or 7 months into our relationship, and we got married right at the end of my college. So yeah, a few years later, but that's really cute though. It's not as cute as like, I wish we had known each other since I was 8 years old. That would be really cute.
So we've gone through like old picture albums and found pictures of her and I in like the same group photos from that time period. So yeah, it's very traceable. My kids are like looking at these pictures like, whoa, there's mom and dad when they were our age. You know, it's
That's so cute. Oh, I love that. That's the best thing ever. That's a great story.
Yeah, it was. There was a reason we were going through a bunch of old picture albums at my parents' house. I was like, whoa, there they are. Actually, it took one of my friends actually asking my wife out for me to stop running the wrong direction.
You're like, no, not my girl.
That's pretty much, yeah. So I got mad. I stormed out of the place that we were at. We were at it was a bar, but we were there, and I was like, I'm out of here. So I took off in my car. Everybody knew I was mad, but I just didn't even bother explaining it. And there was like a song that came on my drive home. And it was like, you got to go back, essentially, was the theme of the song. So I was like, okay, turn it around. We'll make this happen. And to this day, my wife's like, you never actually asked me out. You just changed my Facebook status to in a relationship.
What?
Yeah. Because that's basically what happened after that. But like, whatever. She didn't say no. So,
That was it. Wow. You're pretty confident. I'll give you that. That was pretty confident there.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, and I was right. So, you know what? Whatever.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well,
so yeah, I've had a few moments like that over the years, but that was a wild time. And when we would explain like the whole everything that had happened leading up to her and I dating, people are like, and you guys are still together.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yes,
it actually worked out. That's awesome. So you guys must, let's see, you're going on like what, 12 years?
No, so I was we're both turning 33. If we got married at 23, you mean dating? 10. So from dating, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. I thought you meant from when I got married, and I was like, no, that's not quite right. But yes, you're correct.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So anyway, so long story short, that's how my wife and I essentially got together. The short version.
Well, your kids are gonna love it when they get older. That's great. That
story is like an
bar.
adult story. I would tell that story later when they can understand it. You know what I mean?
Is this like How I Met Your Mother? Is that what this is gonna be like?
No. Because the Ted was trying to date whoever for like a decade. This is like
that's right.
less than 3 years of her and I not being single until we were. But
well, I mean, like from 8 to 18,
Yeah, exactly. But
oh, that's funny.
Okay, so you've told kind of some of your background. How did you get into podcasting? What is integrated?
Okay, so yeah, that's a great question. So
maybe we should hold up one more question before that though.
I feel like I need
Have you always been Catholic, or did you become Catholic?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I've actually always been Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, and I feel like our home at the time was kind of like a culturally Catholic. We were pretty nominally Catholic. But I always had a strong inclination towards the spiritual. And even though I, of course, went off the path many, many times, there was always just I knew that the Catholic Church was true. Like it's crazy. I think I just had this really supernatural gift of faith. And so even I would like go to youth group with all my Protestant friends, and they're evangelical and Baptist stuff. I went to IHOP once with my friends. My parents thought I was joining a cult, and in hindsight, I don't blame them. IHOP. Do you know what IHOP is? It's the International House of Prayer.
Yes. Prayer. I thought you meant
not pancakes.
I was thinking the IHOP, like the restaurant.
I went to a pancake house once. My parents were
That's what I was thinking.
I was joining a cult. Yes. Oh boy.
That is really what I thought you meant. I apologize.
You need to do some research on IHOP, the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. I'm pretty sure one of their more recent pastors was just There was like sexual abuse allegations type of a thing, like really big deal within the last couple of years. But it's all very like almost Pentecostal praise and worship, speaking in tongues, kind of wild stuff. That's the first time I was ever exposed to that type of Christianity. But I never once doubted that Catholicism was true, even though those were some of my friends at the time, because I knew that the Eucharist was it was Jesus. Like that to me was it. I never cared about this papal authority stuff. It was the Eucharist. And then in college, I went to a pretty liberal university. At least I graduated from a liberal university. I did go to a liberal Catholic college before that, but I couldn't afford it. So I ended up at
Catholic colleges are very expensive.
They're very expensive. I will say that the Catholic Studies program there was excellent, but the rest of the school was pretty liberal. Anyway, I went to a 4-year, very liberal state school, probably one of the most liberal in the state of Minnesota. And I just remember being, first of all, confronted with how terrible the Newman Center there was. I thought all Newman Centers were just like the worst things I've ever seen in my life. Not using real like hosts they used bread for the Eucharist. We were actually told on projectors not to kneel during the consecration. Like just wild stuff. This woman that was a part of the like administration there would give messages after the homily sometimes, like crazy, super heterodox. And of course that priest has been laicized after being put in jail for sexual abuse of a student there. And
oh geez.
Oh yeah, it was insane. So at that time, that was kind of the first time when I was like starting to think like I feel like I need to have a reason. Like apologetics was starting to become a thing for me because I had gotten involved in pro-life work, and I love apologetics. I love pro-life apologetics. I love discussing abortion with people, but I realized that I needed to learn more about my faith as well. So that love of apologetics naturally translated into wanting to understand Catholicism more and have a defense for that. Because I had some really bad professors. Like I had one professor who would wear shirts to the Newman Center saying women should meet priests and like pro-gay marriage stuff. We could get extra credit.
I'm sorry. Did you say that the priest was wearing that?
I'm sorry, not the priest. This professor. Sorry.
This professor. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I might have just misheard you. So.
No. Well, this professor there, he was my psychology professor in a 300 level course, and he would like bash the Catholic Church nonstop. This class started with over 30 students, and by the time I finally withdrew, there were maybe 11 students, and we could get extra credit for going to.
And this was at your non-Catholic university.
Non-Catholic school.
All right.
It's in a Catholic city though. Like it's crazy to me. The school it's in St. Cloud. It's named after St. Cloud. St. Cloud is like an actual saint, and we had a cathedral downtown and stuff. Anyway, he was super liberal. We could get extra credit for going to underground masses and like gay talks and stuff. It had literally nothing to do with psychology. And that was kind of around that time I was like, oh my goodness, I need to have a better defense, because I had classmates of mine going, well, he says women are second-class citizens in the Catholic Church. Why are you Catholic? Because I was not shy about being Catholic. And anyway, it was just a lot at the same time. So that was kind of the first time that my faith was really somewhat tried, insofar as I felt like I didn't know enough. And so then I started a lot of reading. And then, after that, I feel like it was just sort of lit a fire into me. And then, working for LifeSite during the McCarrick scandal, that was probably the closest I've ever gone to losing my faith, I would say. And I started looking into Judaism.
Because of McCarrick and what he had done. Yeah.
Well, and just like the overall, like being more aware of like how bad it is behind the curtain,
Yeah.
And talking to people like John Henry Weston about it, and our donors and everybody. It was just like a lot. And
so you looked into Judaism of all things?
I did. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So it was pretty much the only thing that I was convinced, if Catholicism is not true, then it was that
then you
the
go
Messiah.
Backwards.
Yep. Because I knew Protestantism was false. Like that wasn't even a question, even though it's appealing. I mean, I won't say it's not appealing. It's appealing to feel like there are no constraints or no obligations to what quote unquote freedom looks like, and realizing it's not really free, and it's really wrong, and it's very ahistorical. And so the only other option, because I knew Islam was certainly false, was like, well, then maybe some sect of Judaism like really
I'm
retained
surprised you
the
didn't
truth.
go like Orthodox.
I don't think I knew enough about Orthodoxy, but if I had known what I know now, I still wouldn't have even considered it, because I know that they sorry, one of my kiddos is tattling on the other one right now for getting the toddler all riled up.
Oh no.
Honey, I can't deal with that right now, so it's just gonna have to be what it is. You can go to bed though. It's a live show, folks. My husband is still out working. There were a lot of storms that rolled through today. So, but yeah, what was I saying?
You're talking to like one of the few people who like actually knows what a lineman does. So
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
so I know what you're talking about when you're talking about storm duty,
so
and I'm like, oh boy.
Well, yeah, he works a ton right now, especially this time of year. But yeah, so I wouldn't have considered Eastern Orthodoxy, knowing now, like for example, that they are okay with contraception, and divorce. Like that would have been absolutely like, okay, that's not it then. That's all I would have needed to know.
Oh yeah, because the Orthodox, some sects of Orthodoxy do allow for that. In fact, I think the majority of them do at this point.
Yeah, well, it's just Protestantism. It looks a little cooler though. Like they have a cooler liturgy. That's really what it is. It is that Protestantism. They're protesting the Pope. They are the first Protestants, and that's not to say I don't love Eastern Orthodoxy or whatever. I think it's awesome. I think in some ways we have a lot to learn, but at the end of the day, it's not the Roman Catholic Church.
Hey, to be fair, I've heard an argument that the first Protestants were the Jews who rejected Jesus.
Yeah, that's a good argument too. I mean, that's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. But I just knew that if I were to convert, it wouldn't be to Protestantism.
Yeah.
It just wasn't even an option. So
you didn't even explore like the reincarnation and all that. No, I'm just kidding.
I've never really been into New Age spirituality or.
All right, so you stumbled through the McCarrick era, and then that's where we stopped at. So where were you at after that?
Yeah, so I think after that, and then leaving LifeSite and sort of just recommitting to like what do I know to be true about the Catholic Church, and then just continuing to learn more about that. And then the reason I ultimately ended up starting the podcast, that was a really long answer. I guess you did ask.
Well, you answered multiple questions at once.
Yes.
You answered Catholic. Now you're in podcast space.
So it does lead into this. So after my fourth kid, we sort of talked about this a little bit before we started the show, but my fourth kiddo, he really struggled. I don't know, he just had lots of stuff going on. And I was in a really horrible headspace, like very anxious and depressed. And quite frankly, I was experiencing a lot of postpartum rage and feeling extremely isolated. And my husband has always been like my number one fan, like quietly, but behind the scenes, he's definitely very phlegmatic. So he's kind of the person that doesn't really say anything unless it's really important. And one day we were talking about kind of what was going on, because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. My son just never stopped crying, and he wouldn't let anyone else hold him. And it was night and day. I think maybe the first day where he like started to let other people even really look at him and maybe somewhat hold him, he was probably 15 months old or something. Like it was a long time. And he's number 4. So there were other kids, and I homeschool and stuff. So it was just a really brutal time. And my husband saw that I needed an outlet of some kind. And he's always felt like communications was something I'm okay at, I have an inclination towards that. So he was like, you should just start a podcast or something. And at that time, I was learning a lot about my son's issues. And a lot of it was just disintegration in his body. All my kids have oral ties. And when you start to learn,
tie?
Yep.
Okay.
And so when you start to learn about like the tissues in the body and how your nervous system interacts with all these other systems in your body and your brain development and just a myriad of things, I was like, wow, so much of this has to do with integration. And I felt like at the time my life needed more integration as well, because I was so broken. And so that was like the beginning of Integrated, was sort of this pursuit of reintegrating the mind, body, and soul, because I also believe that a lot of the cultural issues that we see today are because we're so disconnected from our nature. And so to be able to have more conversations about how do we reintegrate those things became really important to me. So it was multi-level.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to be fair, like, how many people even have a good grasp on the body in general?
No,
Because
we don't.
what do we do to treat symptoms? Medicate.
Yes, and everything
No
is
matter
treated
what
as
it
an
is.
independent system. Like,
Yeah.
there's never a look, there's not a holistic look. That's one of the downfalls, I think, of allopathy. And so I've talked about that on my podcast before, but really, our bodies are designed in just the most amazing, incredible way. But when you mess with one part of the ecosystem in a body, so to speak, it has implications for other systems in the body. And so and that can make it really difficult to find healing if you're looking at it at a purely natural level. But the same can be said on a spiritual level as well. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think we do need to learn more about our own bodies too.
And people completely disregard the fact that the stomach has such a big play on your brain,
Mm-hmm.
what your feelings are, because it not only does it develop things because it changes things into energy, which you use to grow and do different things, especially when you're a kid. But like, the liner of the stomach is there for a reason, and if you start to break down that liner, well, now you've got things that could seep out from the stomach to the spine to the other parts of your body, and like the ulcer thing, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I have definitely learned a lot about how the various body systems interact just from unlearning behaviors as a teenager or even just a young 20s guy who thought he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, I think all of us have, especially as a parent, I feel like it
Yeah.
puts a finer focus on a lot of that. Like even things as simple as making sure your kids crawl for at least 3 months before they start walking, because it's that motion where they're coordinating across their bodies with their arms and legs is so important for the development of the lower parts of the brain. And if you get a solid foundation, it's going to help with their balance and things like that. If you're having a hard time being balanced, the rest of your body is going to have ADHD like symptoms, because your body is constantly fighting itself because it's
Mm-hmm.
not stable. But then it prevents sort of the long-term development. It slows down the development of the brain moving forward. And you start with kind of your primitive brain, and then you get more of that complex function as you move forward. That's why your frontal lobe is the last part of your brain to develop.
Yeah.
And that's where all the decision making is and things like that.
Especially long term.
And so like it will impact impulse control, things like that. And so kids who often don't have a strong midline, they'll often have things like retained reflexes in their body. So like a rooting reflex. That's why a lot of kids who are still sucking their thumbs long term or biting, chewing on things, they still have a rooting reflex that babies have to nurse. If that doesn't integrate properly, it just wreaks havoc on the brain, because those reflexes need to integrate. Or even that falling reflex, the moral reflex, if that doesn't get integrated properly within that first, I don't know, I think it's around 6 months it's supposed to be integrated, then that also, the body is unstable and it's more prone to activating the nervous system, so that you're in a sympathetic state and you're like fight or flight. So it's just fascinating stuff. So I learned a lot. But yeah, I mean, and then sort of that self-reflection of like, okay, now where in my life am I disintegrated, and what parts, like, why am I feeling so anxious, and do I just need to eat and sleep more? Is it really that simple? And a lot of the time it is. So, but yeah, it was a lot of that stuff sort of culminating at that moment, and integrated just gave me an outlet to talk through some of that stuff and meet really awesome people, and some of my best friends I've met doing this stuff. And yeah, I've really grown to love it, and I've grown to love the audience and stuff that I've been able to get to know a little bit better over the last couple of years. So yeah.
That's really nice that you've been able to find the outlet, and that your husband kind of helped you identify that. That's shows good partnership too.
He is awesome. Like, I mean, every marriage has its own stuff. That's part of being
Yeah.
in relationship, right? Like you're learning with this person. But yeah, he's like my number one fan, even though he's probably never listened to he's probably never listened to a podcast of mine, but he's always like, I get to listen to you all the time. Why would I want to turn on something and listen to you.
My wife actually has a very similar opinion. She's like, I will probably never listen to your podcast, period. She's like, and I hope you're okay with that.
I'm like, I understand. I don't want to listen to myself any more than I have to either.
She's like, as long as you don't tell me you're saying nasty things about me on the podcast, I'm never going to listen.
For real. Oh
like,
my goodness.
I would never do that. So
nope. That should always be off limits. So yeah.
Although I have had a few people say you should interview your wife, and I'm like, I don't think she would want to.
I've tried to get my husband on. Like I said, he's very phlegmatic and he's like painfully introverted in some ways. So it's been me doing this for like 3 years now or something, maybe 4, and he won't come on. So good luck. Maybe better luck to you.
Well, my wife is an extrovert, like very much. Yes. Oh yeah.
Get her on then.
I'm the introvert, believe it or not. I'm quite the introvert, but I have like, I guess it was described as like the extrovert of introverts, whatever.
That's actually how I am too. So it's funny that you say that. So I feel like I have to ask you, why did you start your podcast? What's your goal?
This one or all of the podcasts I've done?
Well, this one. What's the goal here with Crash Canon?
I just feel like there's not enough just hang around and talk Catholic podcasts out there. They're all like either getting into too much theology or too much politics. I just want one for like regular people. And I kind of modeled it after like Pints with Aquinas and Avoiding Babylon.
Okay. Yeah.
Just kind of free flowing, talk about things. And hopefully if it helps somebody, then we're doing a good job.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? Is to get people to heaven, or at least to not be a stumbling block at the very least, right?
Yeah. I just like talking about theology, so it's like a nice outlet for me anyways, theology.
So your wife doesn't feel like she has to talk to you about it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Although she's always like, when you come out of this podcast, you have to turn podcasting off and like actually have a conversation. I'm like, but podcasting is like conversational, it's just different.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh yeah.
But I had a podcast that I did for about 5-ish years, and in fact we're still planning to do one more on this other channel that we have. It's called the Krillcast. I don't know if I've posted about it a few times, but it started out like as like an outlet for me and my buddy to do just discussion on entertainment, gaming, culture, and like we talked about videos and television and stuff, and it actually got monetized. We almost have 2,000 subscribers on that channel.
Sweet.
And we just lost all motivation to continue doing it. It's like you get to a point where if you don't feel passionate about the subject anymore, it's hard to keep going. And just it was a dredge talking about culture, politics, entertainment. We just didn't care anymore.
Well, you kind of come down to the same stuff over and over again, and I think that's a problem that I see. At least a lot of podcasts that do end up kind of like a current events type podcast, right? Like you kind of circle through the same, I don't know, 6 or 7 issues kind of over and over again, which isn't inherently like bad or anything, but it is hard to remain creative and like have a drive to put something different out there. When that kind of becomes it's like a vortex, you kind of get sucked into it, right? Like the news cycle. Yeah.
You're making me think of Michael Voris when you say the vortex, though.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Man, that brings me back.
The reason why it's named Crash Canon, though, well, one, my nickname forever has been Chris Crash. That there's literally no reason for it other than a friend of mine said, that sounds kind of cool back in high school, and it's just stuck.
Isn't it weird how things like that? I mean, that's a lot more that's a lot cooler. My nicknames were not very nice growing up.
Well, I had some not nice ones. This is the nice one. This is the one that stuck that was nice. But the canon was originally supposed to be Catholic, and you're supposed to ask your local ordinary, authority, your bishop, to use that word in your business, media, etc. Right? So I messaged Vigneron because he was the archbishop still, and he was on his way out. And then we're getting Weisenberger now, so he's the new archbishop. And I think my email just got lost in translation during that transition. And I was launching the podcast. I was like, well, I have to have a name. And so I just switched it to Canon. I was like, this is close enough. I don't need permission to call it Canon.
Yep.
but it's like nobody thinks of canon as anything other than like canon law. Maybe
Yeah.
you could argue like the weird Star Wars canon stuff, but that's not what this podcast is. So
It's funny that you say that, because I actually didn't know that that was a different title for priests to have until I started hosting. I've guest hosted Ask a Priest Live like several times now, for Jordan Pachenko, or I think that's his last name. I'm so sorry, Jordan. I should know by now. I've only like guest hosted your show probably a dozen times now almost, but I had no idea that Institute of Christ the King, that's how they refer to their priests. Like, so I just remember the first time sitting down, like, what is a canon Murray here? Like, who is that? What does that mean? Oh, because we only have an FSSP here. Like, so I had no idea. Anyway.
Institute of Christ the King is the traditionalist group in the Detroit Archdiocese.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, they have a giant parrot, like it's referred to as the St. Joseph Shrine.
You're in Detroit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Archdiocese of Detroit.
Okay.
I don't live in Detroit.
Yeah.
Archdiocese of Detroit is huge.
How big is it? Is like Grand Rapids in there?
No. But technically the bishops in Michigan are like kind of underneath the Archdiocese of Detroit. Okay. So like they still have their own jurisdictions, but if like there was a council of bishops, then like the archbishop would be. I think that's how that works.
Yeah. Okay.
But the Archdiocese of Detroit covers the largest population in Michigan.
Oh wow, I believe it. Yeah, we were in Grand Rapids a couple of years ago now. That's why I was asking. I'm like, oh, it's interesting. There's just a bunch of little Catholic things going on there in Michigan.
You said you were in Grand Rapids?
I was. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we were visiting.
Like a little trip of some sort?
Yeah, meeting of Catholic. There were a couple of years. I don't even know if there's.
Oh yeah. I forgot they're up around that area. Yeah.
Yep. So we went to go visit Tim Flanders. We had like an MOC family retreat, and so it was like, a sprawl of like 30 kids out in the yard praying the rosary.
That's cool.
with the neighbors in like this neighborhood. It was pretty awesome. But yeah, we went to go visit them, and like Jeremiah Bannister and Jake Fowler and everybody. It was a lot of fun to meet these people in real life that you're like talking to all the time online. So Lars always refers to Lars, my husband. He always refers to them as my imaginary friends. It's like no, they're real people. They're real people. Yeah.
I really like a lot of the various places in Michigan. Like for example, for my wife and I's honeymoon,
it's beautiful.
We went to Mackinac Island and then the Upper Peninsula.
I was gonna say the UP. Man, we have a lot of people out here from the UP actually, because all the Finnish people, that's where they find their spouses if they don't want to marry someone that live in our towns. Yeah, it's super funny. But yeah, a lot of crossover there from like the western Minnesota and the UP for some reason.
That is funny. Is the flag behind you? I tread where I please.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
That is like, so I used to be all about that whole, don't tread on me thing. And then I saw that flag and I was like, no, this is perfect.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. Somebody scolded me on X earlier. I don't know if it was earlier this year, like the end of last year, for this flag, saying like, if you really understood what that flag really means and how disrespectful that is to Our Lady, you wouldn't have that. Like, guess what?
Why is it disrespectful to Our Lady?
I don't know. People are weird.
The
internet's a weird place.
Unless you reject Genesis 3:15 being she shall crush thy head, I don't understand why you'd have a problem with that.
I know. It's the internet.
Where do you land on Genesis 3:15? Because I've asked a lot of people and I always get different answers.
I gotta look. Genesis 3:15.
There's like a ton of people that say it's he shall crush thy head, but I feel like that's very Protestant, whereas the traditional Catholic idea is she shall crush thy head.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I've always read it as she will crush your head, or how is it?
Not in the New American Bible.
That's a good question. I feel like all my Bibles are upstairs. Oh, I have an Oxford annotated Bible over there, but
the original King James, the Dewey Reams, the Knox, and even the Confraternity, they all say she. But if you get into any of the newer Bibles, it's hit or miss whether it's he or she.
Dewey Reams, yeah. Let's see here. Let's see if it will show it for me. Yeah, I will put enmities between thee and the woman, and thy seed and her seed. She shall crush thy head, and thou shalt lie in wait for her heel. Well, duh. That's obviously what I'm going to go with is the Dewey Rames version of the Bible.
There you go.
Yeah.
That is correct.
That's how I've always, in my brain, thought that's what that said. So I was like, does it?
So
no, we're just rewriting the Bible all the time.
The New American Bible that is used in the liturgy for the Novus Ordo says he.
That is really unfortunate. There's a podcast. What is it? I'm trying to remember what this guy's called. He was on Hallow. I don't have Hallow app anymore, but it's the Logical Bible Study podcast. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
He's some Australian, I'm pretty sure. He sounds like Matt Fradd, but like not. And but he's obviously not Matt Fradd. And he goes through and does exegesis on everything line by line. But I think he focuses on the New Testament at least. But what I always gather from his exegesis is like, well, you know, this isn't really a great translation from the from the NAB. This is what it really says. And I'm always like, man, you say that a lot.
So I've done a deep dive, and I'm not going to get into that today because I've gotten into it so many times. But the leading philosophers of the Jewish faith of the time of Jesus all agreed on she, essentially.
I think that's important to know. It's like, but it is crazy. I won't get into the liturgy wars. I go to a unicorn Novus Ordo that I love, and my priest does celebrate the extraordinary form every Tuesday night. Like he would celebrate it more, but for different reasons, he just has not been able to like fully switch over our parish. It's a diocesan parish and stuff, and so there are lots of layers there. But our parish is like pretty much as orthodox as you could possibly get without going full blown TLM every Sunday.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I am definitely more of the lines of like, I love the extraordinary form. I think that it shouldn't be extraordinary. It should be the normative. It should be how we are celebrating Mass. But sadly, we're just, this is what you get in a church where fathers spiritually have absconded from their roles for so long. Yep. It's not just a biological problem of like men leaving their families. We have a spiritual problem too. And so there has to be like more compassion, I think, in the discourse. That compassion and like seeing the big macro picture just sort of has been lost in how we shepherd people right now. It's really in my mind, it's a reflection of the political moment, because our politics is so polarized, and that sort of mindset that like you versus us has really made its way into the church.
So do you guys generally get along with the bishop that's over your diocese?
So yeah, we have.
I'm not trying to get political here. I'm just curious.
So our Archbishop Hebda, actually, like when Traditionis Custodes came out, he sort of like ignored it. Yeah, he didn't really touch it, and there are serious issues in our archdiocese, and it's the Archdiocese of Minneapolis-St. Paul. And so like our archdiocese is bankrupt because of sex scandals from way back when. Good. And so the parishes that are raking in the most money, which ones do you think that those are?
The ones with the TLM.
The traditional parishes. And so yeah. I'm not saying that that's why. I'm grateful that at least when that came out, he was like, I'm not going to do I'm going to turn a blind eye. Like, I think they were supposed to give, my understanding is they were supposed to fill out a form and like, how many parishes are celebrating the extraordinary form, would you say, or whatever. I think he overstated maybe just a little bit, just so that if anyone decided that they wanted to start doing it, there was room for that, you know? I'm not sure. That's kind of what I've been told. Again, it's hearsay. It's alleged. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, Archbishop Hebda, please forgive me. But yeah, that was not an issue. Like,
so the Archdiocese of Detroit, during the term of Archbishop Vigneron, basically had no restrictions at all. I mean, there was like the minor, you had to ask him permission, but at one point, and I don't know how long this was true for, but at one point, the Archdiocese of Detroit had the most Latin masses in the entire United States. At one point.
I think I remember that. Oh my goodness. Okay. this ties into when I worked for LifeSite, because we had a donor and he was from Detroit. Oh my goodness. You're just like bringing something out in the recesses of my tiny brain. He like had this whole idea about how he was a really nice guy. But I think I don't know what was going on. He had this whole idea of like how Detroit was really like the centerpiece to renewal in the church, and he had this very elaborate like multi-page document that he sent me. He wanted me to propose it to, and like I don't know how he worded how he wanted me to do this, but basically it was to like propose this idea to the bishop and help gain some like just kind of a little bit of an oomph into like some support into what his big idea was. And it was, yeah, Detroit was right at the heart of it. I just saw the documents for it. I still had it for some reason in like an old file cabinet. It was pretty wild. Yeah, but I didn't realize. I'm sure he goes to TLM there. Like I'm sure.
So, but now with the new archbishop installed by Pope Francis just before he died, so thank you, Pope Francis. Now we're down to one per region, and there's 4 regions.
It's cruel.
And he's implementing the Traditionis Custodes down to the letter. So it has to be in a non-parish church. And I know which church he's already picked. Like I bet it's very close to where I live. And that church is not equipped at all for the TLM. I mean, I'm sure they'll get it there because the TLM guys they're all very committed to getting this thing going. But
it's very
it is
sad.
not equipped for it.
It's very, very sad that it makes me think of, there was once in my early 20s, I was a newlywed. I probably had 1 kiddo at the time. And I had never had I gone to the extraordinary reform? I don't think I had. Maybe I'd gone once or twice. But I was starting to kind of trend in that direction without maybe realizing it. And I remember I was sitting in our parish council, of course, and you got Susan there, and you've got Bob, and everyone's, we're talking about. I was hands down by several decades the youngest person on that board, or on that council, and our priest at the time had the idea that he was going to start saying 3 prayers during the liturgy ad orientem. That was it. I don't even think he was saying anything in Latin.
And the boomers got mad.
Boomers got big mad. Big mad. And
we had boomers chase off a priest for that exact same thing.
It was crazy.
In one of the parishes I used to belong to.
It was so sad to me. And first of all, I was like, Father, why are you asking for our input? Just do it. Like I get that you're trying to be mindful of your flock, and there's something to that, but like 3 prayers ad orientem, nobody's even going to notice probably. Right. But the other thing that was so fascinating was that in one of these meetings, one of the gentlemen was asking questions about how do we build more engagement into Mass and get some of the younger kids here, and he's like, I remember back in the 80s we used to do dancing.
Oh no.
And then my jaw just hit the floor. It's like, oh my goodness, please tell me we're not going there. We're not going there, are we? And sorry. I have a kid that just came in here and is knocking down my
I saw
light.
A flashlight. Oh, your lights.
It was my halo light. Thank you, honey.
I got one of those right here.
Whoop. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. You know what's good. But yeah, and my priest too, he handled it far more delicately than I would have at the time. And my zeal was a little bit probably came off a little too strong at that time. But I just remember being absolutely horrified. And my priest was like, yeah, that's actually not prescribed or even permitted in the rubrics. So we're not going to do that.
Well, good. I'm glad your priest was pragmatic about it, but shut it down.
Oh man, yeah, that was a time to be alive.
I think a mutual acquaintance of ours was at a parish that had liturgical dancing.
Well, the Newman Center that I told you about in college, they did liturgical dancing. I still remember them at the Easter. There was one Easter vigil I went to there, and it was because I was sponsoring this woman from Africa as she was coming into the church, and they had ribbons. And they were going and dancing all over the place in the church. Maybe it was a Easter day mass. Maybe it was Easter morning. But I just remember being thoroughly disturbed I was like, well, if I was not helping this young woman be confirmed into the church, I don't even know like how I could sit through this, because I never want to do this again. It was a horrible experience. Oh, there's Haley.
Haley's on pretty much, I feel like, everybody's channel at some point.
She is. Yep.
And shout out to Haley. If you don't know Haley, go check her out. She had her own channel on YouTube, and she moderates like everybody. So
I know I ran into her just a couple of weeks ago. We were at a homeschooling conference
in person.
And so it was crazy because I thought she was still living in Michigan. I didn't realize that maybe she was moving back to Wisconsin. I don't know. So all of a sudden
she lived in Michigan at one point?
Yeah. Oh, yes. So all of a sudden I look over and I see somebody, and her face just lit up. She recognized me right away. And it took me a minute, just like because the context was so outside of what I was expecting. And all of a sudden she's like, Angela, like it clicked in my brain. Like, it's Haley. What are you doing here? Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. We got to sit in a talk together while our kids were, well, my daughter was all over the place and trying to make friends and put other kids' toys in her mouth and stuff. It was super great.
So IRL, I don't wear the beanie all the time. It gets too hot in the summer. So people don't recognize me IRL. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Oh, really? I was wondering if this is a Tim Cast, Chris Cast delusion.
No, so there's two reasons. The first reason is...
You're secretly bald.
No, I'm not secretly bald. I am bald, and I don't hide it. But in reality, every light in this room turns my head into like a sun. So if I want to like actually podcast without blinding people, I have to put something on my head.
The light.
Exactly. And the second thing is it does give you a little bit of anonymity in public.
Does it? Oh, so I gotta start wearing a hat. Just kidding. No one recognizes me. It's fine.
Something about the beanie does work. I don't know. Like, I've had actual friends of mine that it took them more than 5 minutes watching my old podcast to realize it was me.
That's funny.
Like, like, wait a second, that's you.
I met a homeschool mom last fall. We were at our co-op together, and I sat down at the table that she was at because I saw all of her kids and I knew that she was Finnish. Which, if you grew up where I grew up, there are a lot of Laestadian Lutherans, and it is kind of like a cult. And so when somebody leaves the cult, it's like a really big deal, obviously. And
what kind of Lutheran?
Laestadian.
What is
very it's a sect of Lutheranism that's very, very strict. And so I believe like Finland,
more strict than Missouri Synod.
Oh yeah, they can't they can't watch TV, they can't listen to music, they can't compete in sports,
like Amish
they can't
Lutherans.
Dance. Yes, yep, kind of. Mm-hmm. So a little bit. I mean, not full on Amish. They drive cars and whatever, and they smoke cigarettes, but they're not allowed to drink. And
to be fair, though, I think if the Amish roll their own tobacco, they can smoke it. So I think they could probably smoke too.
Okay, all right. They just don't have the buggies.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I saw her and I just knew right away because they have a certain aesthetic. And my husband's family, they have some Finnish. They're very Scandinavian. And I was like, "Are you Laestadian? Or like, did you convert? Are you Finnish?" And she said, "Yeah, actually I am." And I could also tell because all of her kids had blonde hair and blue eyes. And it's like not normal. Like all the Catholics where I'm at are very German or Irish, And so I sat down and we were talking. She goes, "I got to ask, are you Angela Erickson?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Like from Integrated Angela Erickson?" I said, Yeah, I am." Like, this is weird. That's one of the only times where I've been like, seen in the wild, and somebody like knew. Well, that's not the only other times where people are like, "I follow you on Twitter." I'm like, I'm so sorry.
I'm not gonna say who it was, but I was at a party with some friends, and I was being introduced to people, and like somebody's like, "Oh, hey, whatever," and it happened to be somebody I knew was going to be on my podcast later on. And my buddy stopped the interaction. He goes, "Don't you know who that is?" And the guy goes like, "What? Who is this guy?" He goes, "That's Chris." And he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" I'm like, "Thanks, buddy. I didn't need that interaction."
It's all right. It's all good. I always think it is a little bit weird. I mean, thankfully it doesn't happen often to me, so it's not like, it's not a thing. But yeah, that time, that was probably the most surprised I've ever been, especially knowing that I knew she converted from another
Yeah.
denomination. So I was like, what Catholic podcast have you been listening to? You know,
Yeah.
sure, she was listening to Pints. I have no idea how I would have come up in that. But anyway, so that was kind of fun. Now we're friends. She just had like her 5th baby, and I still need to bring her a meal, but I'm going to go pick up some raw milk for her instead. So
There you go.
yeah.
We got some raw milk hookups in the area that I've had to use.
The hookups.
Well, because I like to use the raw dairy milk for making yogurt.
Yeah, everything is better with raw milk. It just is. Yeah. Everything
and raw
is better.
Buttermilk for pancakes. You're cooking it anyway, so like if there was something in there, who cares?
No, yeah, I mean, I would never. My husband grew up on a dairy farm, so like, it was weird for me as being the person who like never had raw milk before. But yeah, he was all on board when I was like, I'm gonna start getting raw milk. I'm like, sweet.
Pasteurized milk is like, so if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, if anybody's listening, you want to go down like a conspiracy rabbit hole, look up how we got pasteurized milk.
Yeah,
I'm assuming you've been down that road.
I know yes, I'm somewhat familiar with some aspects of it. Yes, so I don't know.
At one point, there was a diverging path. There was 2 competing groups. One wanted to stick to the milk we know and love, coming from the pasture, coming from the cows, raw, and just test it from time to time to make sure it's acceptable for human consumption. Right. And they had developed good methods for testing it. The other group said, well, no, we're just going to feed our cows awful stuff all the time, and who cares, because we're going to pasteurize it anyways.
Yes.
And it's like,
yeah,
why would we choose that route?
There's a good book called Dissolving Illusions. Have you heard of it?
I don't think I have.
So it sort of tells a story of vaccines and whether or not they were effective. And it does start off talking about how absolutely atrocious hygiene things were back when you had so many of these massive illnesses. Like, there was no such thing as hygiene. People were literally living with rats, and like, it's just totally disgusting conditions. And so naturally the cows got sick and their milk was not good. Like,
well, they were eating the remnants of like the barley plant production or something like that. And so the milk was literally coming out like with a blue hue to it.
Yes.
And it looked toxic and poisonous.
And people are still drinking it because they were poor and desperate.
Yeah. And they were feeding it to babies, and babies were dying.
Yep.
But one of the other things I've learned recently is that when it comes to the hygiene, there was a lot of deaths in the hospital due to hygiene until a doctor said, hey, why don't we start washing our hands? And I'm like, they weren't washing their hands between patients. Oh, no.
Isn't it crazy, though? Like, we just get the benefit of like all of, that culminating wisdom and knowledge. Yeah. It just sounds like so stupid. But yeah, I mean, there is something to that, too. Like,
imagine you just got done delivering a baby and you don't wash your hands before the next patient. What is the matter with you? It's like, holy cow. No wonder people were dying in childbirth and all that. I mean,
yeah, for sure. And and then they were like, well, if they weren't washing their hands, they weren't washing any sort of utensils that they were probably using either, Yeah. It's a no for me, dog.
Just like gross. Oh, yeah, and I mean, if you don't wash between, you're bringing somebody else's disease to somebody else, and
exactly,
it's not good.
No, don't recommend that. It's highly discouraged. Yes,
highly discouraged. Absolutely. So I read a book that followed a similar narrative path. It was called "The Moth and the Iron Lung." Have you heard of this book?
I have heard of it. It's been on my wish list now for like 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. Yeah.
And at no point does he say flat out that like a vaccine wouldn't work. He just basically explains why he thinks other factors played a key role in it.
Yeah.
And so I really liked the way he handled the narrative, because he points out the timeline, how the use of lead and pesticides coincides with polio the whole time.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the book, they stop using lead, and what do you know? The vaccine and that happened at the same time. And it's like, so even if one or the other was more effective, you wouldn't know, because both factors happened at the same time.
Well, they actually were seeing a decrease in polio before the vaccine was rolled out.
To a degree, yeah.
To a degree, that was like starting to come down already. So yeah, it is interesting. I feel like a lot of us have definitely been radicalized over the last few years. So
No, really?
Yeah, I know. I'm like very radicalized now. Raw milk drinking, anti-vax mom, and that's not to say could it be possible that some vaccines maybe under some very few circumstances be beneficial? I don't know. Maybe I'll never say never because I'm not that smart, but I mean, I don't know. I have no inclination anymore, no desire to subject anyone to that without knowing for sure, with no certitude.
I am anti-vax sympathetic for sure. Basically, where I'm at is introducing a foreign body to a person, like a foreign agent to somebody's body for something that may or may not happen. You're introducing risk. So you have to have a good reason for it.
Yep. Especially very vulnerable young bodies. If we're talking about starting the schedule right out of the womb, I mean,
yeah, it's insane how quickly you just pump somebody full of things that could be adverse reactions. You really don't know until it happens.
Yeah, you don't. And yeah, a lot of the time I think people will have a reaction, but they're told, oh, that's normal. Like a fever is normal or all these other things. And then they sort of get gaslit when, well, that next vaccine is a little bit more than just a fever or something. Like their body is having a full-blown reaction. And anyway, I did an episode with Pamela Acker on my channel about it.
Okay.
It was really good. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to probably get these girls to bed. My husband's not home yet, so and they're not wanting to go to bed. It's party all night here at the Erickson house, so I'm gonna have to probably get them in bed.
Well, are you saying break or end? Which one?
Probably end because I have a feeling it's gonna take them a while.
That's totally fine.
I would love to stay in chat, but I think they're given the degree, the energy level here. It's going to take a little while.
Well, then I'm just going to hit you with one last question. And
yeah, let's do it.
I think that there's a lack of modesty online that needs to be corrected. And I think you agree with me.
I do. And I wish that we would have gotten into that more.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time we'll have to schedule another. But yes, I definitely agree. And modesty is a big issue. And I think, especially once summertime rolls around, a lot of people sort of think it's a free for all. We're just going to bear it all for the world to see.
We got the Erickson clan going on here.
It's circus here.
All right. Well, it's been a lovely time chatting with you, and we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. I'm gonna hit the end button. You guys will see the outro, and good luck getting the kids to bed. Is there anything you want to shout out real quick while you got everybody's attention?
Well, please watch my recent episode. I just dropped one today, and then I have another one coming up here with Nancy Charles talking about what are the right questions we need to be asking about how we evangelize those with same-sex attraction. So it should be a really great episode, and I think a lot of you guys will like it.
That does sound like a great one, and I've listened to a couple things with her. She's really fun to listen to.
I love her. She's wonderful.
So, all right. Well, on that note, we're gonna end it right here. I'm gonna hit that button, and I'll see you all on the next one.
Thanks.